Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Simão. I'm a founding partner at Lightshift, where we invest and build the most ambitious decentralized projects. And today I'll be sharing a little bit of our thesis on asset-centric networks. So we've been doing some research in this area, and today I'm going to show you why we believe that these type of networks can get massive network effects, and through that be the next trillion-dollar ventures. So let me guide you a little bit through the history of marketplaces, networks, and how we got here. And of course, as we all know, many, many centuries ago, it all started by trading in a peer-to-peer format, right? I have to go to a certain place at a certain point in time. I need to have a good. I need to have like the same currency as this guy, and we're going to agree on exchanging something, right? We then keep on moving forward, and we start having almost stores. So someone sets up a store, they can have several goods, and then people can pass by, and any customer on the street can buy from them. We keep on moving forward, and we almost have like this aggregation model, or closer to what we have as a shopping mall, right? We go and we have several stores. And this is what we see as the start of physical marketplaces, right? And so just to get like a quick definition of marketplaces, it's a platform that connects buyers and sellers, but most importantly, provides the infrastructure to do so. So this was, of course, like many, many years ago, and then we get to the physical age. And on the digital age, sorry. And on the digital age, we can start exchanging information, not just assets, right? So we start having these things that we call networks. First of all, we almost have like these newspapers in a read format that broadcast information. And then second, we can actually read and write. So we can connect in networks such as MySpace, Facebook, and many others. So just to clarify, there are many marketplaces that are considered networks, but they're a little bit different since networks are usually focused on the same type of entity. So if we're all using WhatsApp, we're just like kind of like all users, while on a marketplace, there's usually like a buyer and a seller and a certain distinction between them. So we keep on moving forward, and the next iteration that we have are then digital marketplaces. We connect information with assets that we can trade. And so the digital marketplace ends up as this online platform, and we start having like many examples such as Amazon, eBay, and Airbnb. Finally, I also want to quickly talk about open standards, because for us to get to these marketplaces, we had to develop much better ways of communicating, right? And today, we have open standards that, contrary to marketplaces and networks, are very hard to monetize. They're simply like just a way for us to talk and interact. And we can see many, many examples across industries, like from the Ethernet, the Wi-Fi, cellular networks, radio waves, everything, even up to like the PDF and how we share these files. Now, the most interesting thing is that we start noticing that each one of these actually has network effects. And network effects, to answer if something has a network effect, either on the demand side or on the supply side, we can pretty much ask the question on whether or not the next user that comes after us is going to have a better service, it's going to have a better product. And if we keep on increasing more and more users, we're going to have even better products. Okay, cool. So we go through all this, and in the internet age, we can see that all these network effects start popping up. They start popping up all around us. And that's mostly because we start reducing all this friction. Like instead of being in a certain place, we can just go to a website. Instead of meeting at the same place with someone else at the same time, with the same currency, these open standards, these networks, these marketplaces, the most important thing that they do is that they facilitate this exchange, whether of information or assets. Moving on, the interesting part that comes from it, and I want to touch a little bit on, is that we also start understanding that these network effects are not all the same. We can have different types of networks to start with. One-sided, as I was mentioning, like WhatsApp, we're all just users. Or for example, in Bitcoin, we're all just like transferring money. Two-sided, in which we have like riders and drivers, for example, in Uber. And we have then multi-sided. And pushing these network effects further, I think a very good example is, for example, YouTube, in which each one of the players, and these are more than two, reinforce each other, right? So if YouTube has more users, more viewers, they're going to get more content creators. And more content creators is going to lead to more advertisers, right? But more content creators also creates more movies, more videos on YouTube, and that also leads to more viewers, right? So each one of them works in both ways, reinforcing each other. And so we went from a place in which we had almost like a linear growth, in which we see almost like the value of a network, for example, a TV, it goes up with the number of users, just one by one. The more viewers it has, like that channel or the TV is more valuable, but it grows in a linear format. Then we push it forward, and we can also almost say, look, okay, we have a network, we have many users, but if there are like a few people there, I don't actually interact with them, so they don't have as much value to me. We keep on pushing this forward, and we start having quadratic growth, and this is probably one of the most well-known laws, right? Metcalfe's law. And finally, we push it forward to exponential growth, and we have Reed's law. And I think this is like the most interesting thing on how these networks have been growing as we reduce these barriers and we get more open standards and better communication. The very interesting thing here is that once we started looking at the number of participants, and as you can see, they all add n for the number of participants that goes up, we also started realizing that the proximity between these users matters a lot, right? If I actually interact with every one of you here in this room, this network is a lot more valuable to me than if I just have one friend, right? And that happens a lot when we're bootstrapping those networks that we join. But also the value of trade between these participants. And in another way, the velocity at which we exchange information. If I go to a network once a month, it's probably a lot less useful than if I go there every single day, right? So now that we went through this and we kind of like saw these concepts, I want to introduce this thesis that we've been developing of asset-centric networks. And our idea is that we can completely redesign industries by facilitating the communication between players that today do not communicate. And by that, we not only increase the value of the exchanges between them, we increase the value of the market as a whole. So what is an asset-centric network? Basically, it's a technology that sets an open standard. This is the way in which we're going to communicate. It's just technology. Now, the interesting part is that by all agreeing on this technology and on this communication, we're going to benefit all the players that are participating. A very important point is that it leverages trustlessness. So we don't have to trust each other, and this is being enabled by blockchains. Not necessarily decentralization, but that definitely helps to get to trustlessness. Each one of these networks is just focused on one single asset. And these assets are some of the most valuable assets / industries in the world. We allow these assets to be tokenized, fractionalized, transferable within the network, and programmable to any applications. And most importantly, we stop having a marketplace, or we stop having a network, and we start enabling many marketplaces on top of it. Finally, all the data that we generate accrues to this network, to this open protocol. So let me show you how this works with an example that we're super excited about, a company called Arda. And it all starts when we look at how the world works, for example, in real estate, right? So we have many users, and you probably know some of these names, right? So if you want to rent a place where to stay, or if you want to buy and sell a house through CBRE, Savills, Sotheby's, one of those brokers that are around, or if we want to also buy and sell it through Open Door or Booking or whatever, we can see that all these players, even though they're in real estate, they're working in a siloed way. First of all, they don't communicate between each other, right? If Savills wants to sell a place, they have to go and find the seller. Second, they have to go and find the buyer. And once they can do that, they have to start all over again, right? Maybe that person sold to someone else. They have to find that apartment once again. It's a mess. And they lose all the data with that asset. And the reason for that is because we're all still focused on making the exchange. We're not focused on the asset itself. So the change, what we're presenting here, is that instead of having them working in a siloed way, the data stays with each one of them, the assets stay with each one of them has to acquire the users. We pretty much create a layer that unites them all and gets all the supply. We get all the real estate that can be used by any of one of these players. Now imagine that my parents want to sell a place, and instead of putting it on CBRE that has to find like a particular user, they can actually list them on any of these players. And once that place is actually purchased, it stops being available somewhere else. You always have all the supply in the market, and you can see everything that happened to the asset throughout history. You have transparent information, right? So I think there's also an interesting thing in like, why have we failed to build this so far? Because there are like some attempts of doing this in certain markets with blockchains. But I think that the most important thing is that we never built these asset-centric networks. Everyone is still building marketplaces, right? I think we have all heard of some people tokenizing wine, or people tokenizing watches, or like tokenizing these things. But they are still going for supply and demand. Someone else can also tokenize some watches that won't be available in that marketplace. Everyone is trying to fight for the user, but no one wants to help us get the user, right? We're still always like fighting each other. So what if we can create like these protocols that benefit us all and allow us to provide a much better proposition to the final user? And second, I think most of these blockchain applications, by trying to build marketplaces, they fail to get to critical mass. And there's like this very interesting concept from Nassim Taleb, in which he talks about like how 0.3% of all the American population is kosher, right? Or halal. But like every single drink in the US is kosher or halal. But why? Why, if the number of users is so small? And it's because those who eat kosher and halal, they cannot drink anything else, but anyone who doesn't can access these products. So all the vendors, all the restaurants, all the airplanes, like everyone just would rather have a standard that works for us all, right? So this concept of getting to critical mass is extremely important. And so that's why I also want to give the example of D3. D3 is doing this, is creating an asset-centric network, not for real estate, just like Arda, but they're doing this for domains. And once again, if you go to GoDaddy, or if you go to name.com, or Namecheap, or like anything like that, any one of those marketplaces, D3 is not competing with them. D3 is tokenizing all the domains in the world and using and offering them a platform to access those domains. To tokenizing, they can offer lending, they can offer any type of applications on top of it. The way they got to critical mass is pretty much the idea of being kosher, right? They made a partnership with Identity Digital that has a ton of domains, and they went for the most valuable ones, right? So I think we can all agree that if they're able to tokenize all the .com domains, they pretty much have the market. Every single one of the domains that they tokenize, now GoDaddy has to integrate their standard and has to connect to D3. It's one less domain that they can sell. And this is when we start powering massive and massive and massive network effects. They also made a partnership, or they are working very closely with ICANN. It's a nonprofit that governs domains on a global scale, and they're in fact trying to find the best standard for everyone to communicate. Now, if we have these layers that accrue all the data and allow people to transact and program, they're going to generate a fee of every transaction. They're going to get like the information by helping everyone to interact in a much better way. Now, we believe that this can be applied to many other industries. Another example that we have is, for example, on healthcare. We're super excited about a company called AminoChain. They just raised from A16Z as also an asset-centric network to help us exchange, transact, program biosamples, and helping people that need get the blood all around the world, or any organs or any other like samples on the healthcare industry. Domains, as I was mentioning, D3, they just raised a 25 million Series A by Paradigm. They're growing really, really fast. Real estate, Arda, we're super excited about them. This is being built by the ex-head of digital assets at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. And so we keep on looking for many other teams, travel, automotive, music, that want to do this. And we're pretty much looking for teams that have specific knowledge on how to create an open standard that works for all these players and benefits all these players. And on top of it, have the connections to bootstrap that critical mass to make sure this happens. So yeah, so if you're building in a space or something like this, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to talk.
Thank you so much, Simão. We still have time for one or two questions. Amazing thesis, by the way. Thank you. So if anyone in the audience wants to, can you come closer, please?
What's the main difference between networks, asset-based networks, and real-world asset or tokenization? Like, is there a fundamental shift in thinking or a difference to separate the two?
No, yeah, exactly. So I think that's a great example, actually. As I was mentioning before, I think most of these RWA platforms, I was mentioning watches and wine, for example, but you can also take like stocks or anything else. They are still building each other as they're building themselves as marketplaces. They're trying to get the user. They're trying to get the final interaction, and so they're all fighting. If you're trying to tokenize stocks, even if it's just like Citadel, they won't let you do it, right? Unless it actually benefits them. You know, they're going to make like immense pressure there. So I think there's also like a very positive spin here in which how we can allow more players to come in, to have a marketplace that is a lot more fair, and that can allow the entrance of many new applications, right?
One last one, if anyone in the audience wants to. Otherwise, Simão will be around as well.
Yeah, sure. Just adding to that once again, I think there's a very important thing here, which is optimizing as much as possible for that asset, right? Most people are also doing tokenization platforms that they want to tokenize everything. But the decentralization, scalability, and security characteristics that you need for real estate is completely different for domains, or it's completely different for watches, right? We believe that you cannot have something that works for everything at the highest speed and at the highest level, basically. I think each one of these teams has to be building fundamentally to address the needs of any of those clients who are marketplaces, being like Airbnb, Booking, or if it's GoDaddy or whoever that is.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
And please do stay around. As you could see, there's some pizza and also there's a bunch of swag leftovers in the meeting room in the back. So yeah, just grab some. Thank you, Simão.
Thanks.